Coming up in This Week in Computer Hardware, Asus Fury R9 Strix reviewed. We got deets on 46 Skylake parts, but still can't buy a Core i67. Not that we're bitter. The secrets of asynchronous shaders. Does Google's OnHub suck? And Asus has some sick gaming laptops. All that and quite a bit more coming up next on Twitch.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Twitch is provided by CacheFly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Twitch, This Week in Computer Hardware, episode 331, recorded September 3rd, 2015. 46 new Skylake parts, but no Core i6700s.
This episode of This Week in Computer Hardware is brought to you by the Ring Video Doorbell. With a built-in HD camera and microphone, you can monitor your front door from anywhere in the world using your smartphone. It's like being home even when you're not. Right now, get $10 off the Ring Video Doorbell when you go to ring.com/Twitch. And by Braintree. If you're working on a mobile app and searching for the right payments API, check out the Braintree V.0 SDK. With one simple integration, you get every way to pay. To learn more and to try out the sandbox, go to braintreepayments.com/Twitch.
Welcome to Twitch, This Week in Computer Hardware, Twitch's weekly show that aims to bring you the most useful, most informative, most engaging, and occasionally most delicately placed computer hardware commentary, thought, testing, benchmarking, reviewing, and occasionally question answering, whether we're talking about cell phones, tablets, desktops, or raging multiprocessor beasts of frenzy, whatever that might be. Ryan, save me here. How you doing, man?
I'm doing fine. How are you?
Probably not as stressed as you are, or maybe relaxed as you are. Is it Ryan Trout, PCPer.com, Hardware Guru Deluxe? Spent, half of this week working out the tables for the 46 flavors of Skylake processor. Or as I like to call them, Silver Lake processors.
Yeah, you can call them whatever you want. It doesn't really matter. Yeah, it felt like it took half of the week to make those tables, and I made a mistake of I thought I had made all of them on a desktop PC at the office, and I was like, okay, I'm going to go home and finish writing on the laptop. And then I got home and I realized I totally forgot all the desktop parts, so I had to make 20 more entries with a laptop and trackpad, which is a little bit less fun, even less fun than making tables in HTML any other way. So pretty awesome.
Well, we'll get into Skylake in a couple of minutes, because it's ironic that despite the fact that the Core i6600 and Core i6700 that I can't buy debuted several weeks ago, Silver Lake was actually announced earlier this week officially, including all of the 44 other SKUs from 4.5 watts to 91 watts. So there's a huge variation, pretty much all the products from, little tiny compute sticks through convertibles, tablets, laptops, desktops, enthusiast desktops. We'll get into that in a minute. You got your hands on the Asus Strix Radeon R9. You have a review, and also we should point out that you have the Nano reviews are not up. The Nano reviews are forthcoming.
Correct.
So you have more Nano details.
Yes, we have one. We're going to use. I've been messing around with it today and kind of testing on it, waiting for a couple of mini ITX cases to come in. Trying to find the smallest cases that are actually for sale and see what benefits that small form factor might have. But those reviews, that'll be, I think by the time we do Twitch next week, those reviews will be up and ready to go.
Mini ITX cases are really frustrating, because the ones you really want all require an external power supply or a miniaturized power supply that provides 150 watts. And then by the time you get to the ones that will actually hold the full ATX power supply you need for something like the Nano, it's the size of a toaster again, which I guess is still smaller than, any of the desktops behind me right there. But I'm just trying to figure out a way to run a, 500-600 watt ATX machine or power supply to a little tiny ITX case. This is a pain, man.
It is. It can be. We'll talk about that next week when we dive into what the Nano actually can do for people. The Asus Strix Fury is a full-length graphics card. It is the little brother to the Fury X, right? So if you remember, we had the Fury X launch with its integrated water cooler, and then we had the Fury launch, which is the same Fiji GPU with fewer shaders enabled. So they disable a couple of hundred of those shaders, I believe. And you get small disadvantages in like texture counts and ROPs and that type of stuff as well. But you get the same 4 gigs of memory, high bandwidth memory capable of 512 gigabytes per second of memory bandwidth, right? All the technology is still the same. And we've talked about the Fury before when I had the Sapphire card. The Asus card here differs in a couple of ways. One, it's looks very different. It has a different cooler implementation on it. The Strix line, their branding for it is that of an owl, and the idea is that it's supposed to be performance when you need it, but quiet when you don't, type of thing. And it was the first company, that was the first line to really introduce the idea of the fans turning off completely when your GPU was an idle or under a certain, I think like under 65 or under 60C, something like that.
Right.
So that still permeates through the Strix Fury. What's interesting here is that the PCB is very different. You look at that shot. You've got this back plate that kind of covers everything. The red square is actually an outline of the GPU. Again, it gives you an idea of how massive the Fiji GPU is with its high bandwidth memory implementation on it, on an interposer piece of silicon. That is like a support protector for the graphics card, right? To keep the PCB from warping over extended time, right? Hanging upside down is the idea behind that. But the PCB itself on the Asus card is like full length. It's like a full length, 10.5 inch, 11 inch PCB that you would see on a flagship video card. If you remember back to the Fury X and the Fury from Sapphire, those were both using 7.5 inch PCBs. It was part of the interesting thing, right? The Fury X had this very small card form factor with an external water cooler. And all Sapphire did was take that same card and slap a giant heatsink on it. And the heatsink extended well past the PCB, and they had some kind of support structure behind it for that. What Asus did is they built their own PCB for it, kind of space things out a little bit, give them a little bit more room to breathe, a little bit more room for, either thermal dissipation or better trace routing or any number of things that they could have updated in this, because they did improve power delivery on it over reference. And you can do that, whether or not it has any actual effect on performance, debatable, but it is a unique design decision, if nothing else. Yeah, you can see that shot there where they kind of took the solid caps there, as well as the inductors, and kind of moved them out a little bit, didn't cramp their style as much. But you can see even on the right-hand side, there's a lot of empty PCB space that you're not used to seeing on a high-end discrete graphics card, for example. So that's kind of the major design difference. Performance-wise, the Asus card and the Sapphire card are nearly identical in pretty much every aspect, right? Out-of-the-box performance, up to 1,000 megahertz, pretty much runs at 1,000 megahertz all the time. The overclocking capability of this card is really also identical to that of the Fury, also kind of identical to that of the Fury X, in that we didn't get much out of it. That's been one of the biggest complaints from people after the Fury X announcement, where AMD kind of did a live stream and they got on stage and they talked about the design, was that they claimed there was going to be significant overclocking headroom on these parts because of the coolers and the GPU design and all that stuff. And that just did not turn out to be the case. These GPUs do not overclock. We're kind of at whether it be a voltage limit or a thermal limit. I don't think we're at a thermal limit because of the Fury X running at 55C, but we're at a voltage limit or some other limit on this piece of silicon. We were only able to push the Asus Strix Fury from 1,000 to 1,050 megahertz. So you're looking at, what is that, 5% increase in clock speed. Not fantastic. And then obviously you're not even going to get that full 5% improvement in actual gaming. You're going to get probably closer to 2, 3, maybe 4% as you kind of distribute that overclock advantage across the board. But it is identical to what we saw on the Sapphire card, even though if you look at the last page of the review, the Strix R9 Fury temperatures are about 5 degrees lower than that of the Sapphire card, 70 degrees Celsius versus 75 degrees Celsius. That doesn't drastically change things, but it tells you that, temperature is not really the limiting factor here with these particular products. The other thing, kind of, if you look at these cards that perform identically, how do they differentiate? It's on maybe thermals, it's on sound levels. The Asus Strix Fury under a full gaming load is actually louder than the Sapphire Tri-X R9 Fury that we tested a few weeks back or a couple of months back. 35 dB versus 32 dB. It's still quieter than the R9 Fury X, which is the water-cooled, massive beast flagship card that they released as well. And then what we noticed on this card is that on the Fury, because it's a custom PCB with custom components, no coil whine, no board whine. Obviously, there's no pumps, so none of that. Everything high quality, as you kind of come to expect from some of the flagship Asus cards, more or less. Not that we necessarily heard that on the Sapphire, but you run into a higher risk of it since it's using the reference PCB design, I guess. So it's quiet, but not as quiet as the Sapphire card. It does run cooler than the Sapphire card. The main limiting factor in all of these purchasing decisions is availability. Well, okay, yeah. So if you look, like Newegg, I think they don't have the Asus one in stock anymore. They might have had the Sapphire. The Amazon listing last night when we recorded the podcast was listed at $569 and out of stock. Now it is listed at as in stock from some third-party reseller at $720 with $18.99 shipping charge. So yeah, there's that. Yeah, if you look on the Amazon, it is apparently still out of stock at $569 as well. So that's the main problem with AMD's Fury launch in totality, is that they're not perfect products. They each had a couple little quirks, but they're really good products compared to what they've had in the past. Availability is the biggest concern, right? That you can't buy the parts even if you wanted to, and I'm sure that's frustrating for AMD as well as consumers. But that's kind of where we're at. If you can find the card at like the $569 MSRP, I think it's an excellent high-end graphics card. It's an excellent discrete GPU for people who are running at 2560 by 1440 or trying to dive into that 4K market. It's going to provide the power necessary to get started down that way as well.
Speaking of parts we can't seem to get our grubby little paws on, it seems like a good time to transition over to Intel's Skylake, the 6th generation core processors, most of which have not been physically launched yet. But September 1st this week, Ryan had the glorious opportunity to look at a pretty massive presentation. If you go to PCPro.com, Intel's best processors ever, the broadest range of designs, amazing experiences, leap in performance and power efficiency, ready for business, optimized for Windows 10 with the 6th gen Intel Core, stunning visual performance. The Y series, the U series, the H series, and the S series. Burke, you can just slide right down to the next slide on there. The Y series is essentially the super low power part, U series for thin and light notebooks, H series for mobile performance and workstations, S series for desktop performance, value, AIO, and minis. And then there's the next slide, which I particularly love, and you and I were talking about this, up to 2.5 times faster performance, 30x graphics improvements, and 3x longer battery life as compared to a 2010 Core i5, the Core i5 6200U, which is a 15-watt part, versus the Core i5 52 or 520UM, which is an 18-watt part from 2010. Definitely a huge, a pretty solid, I think, boost in visual graphics or GPU performance. Some interesting stuff going on with the architecture, and there is a metric ton of SKUs. Should we start at sort of the high-end stuff or the low-end stuff?
Let's start on the mobile side. I think that's the most interesting, and you can help guide me, right? We don't want to detail every individual SKU that's being released, but there's a couple of key points, right? So on the mobile side, you have a 45-watt family, which is your quad-core, hyper-threaded, max turbo clocks of like 3.8 gigahertz, price at $568, right? Your flagship parts that are going to be in your gaming machines, your mobile workstations, just anything that's like super high performance, right? That's what you're looking at there. You go down one other step and you get the 28-watt parts, which are an interesting kind of in between, as they are dual-core hyper-threaded parts that include Iris graphics, right? So the Core i7-6567U, which just rolls off the tongue, is a dual-core hyper-threaded 3.3 gigahertz base clock, 3.6 gigahertz turbo clock with Iris 550. Keep in mind that the Iris graphics is the version of the integrated graphics that includes the embedded DRAM, the L4 cache.
Right.
The Iris has 64 megs. Parts will come out in the future that will have Iris Pro. Those will be 128 megs of cache. So this 28-watt segment that has 4 processors in it, they're all dual-core hyper-threaded, but they all have Iris 550 graphics. So they all have 64 megs of that onboard cache, which is really nice, right? And we'll be curious to see like what kinds of systems these end up in. And then you step down to the 15-watt parts, and this is kind of like where the bulk of sales are made from Intel. This is where your MacBook Airs are going to be, your Ultrabooks are going to be, your Thin and Lights. They're going to be in this 15-watt spectrum, and those are all again are 2-core 4-thread processors, ranging from 2.6 gigahertz base clock to 2.0 or so. Just a little bit lower clock speeds, maximum turbo clock speeds than the 45-watt parts. But what's interesting here is if we scroll down to the next table, actually, Burke, past that, and we look at the 15-watt TDP parts, you'll see that like the 6650U is a dual-core hyper-threaded blah, 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 but it has Iris 540 graphics, which means it has that 64 megs of onboard cache. But the one right below that, the 6600U, has HD 520. It's just kind of your basic integrated graphics, your basic Skylake integration. So you actually have half the compute units on the HD 520 that you do on the Iris 540, and you don't have the onboard cache. Now, they're both 15-watt parts, so I'm very curious to see what vendors are going to use these CPUs in them, and then how they utilize them. Is it going to be aimed at a gaming audience, like, hey, mobile kind of mainstream gaming, or is it more going to be used as, hey, for compute applications that take advantage of heterogeneous stuff? Can we utilize that L4 cache, that EDRAM, in a unique way? I will say the disappointing part through all of this stuff, talking about any processor that has Iris has no price listed. So we don't really know what Intel is what the premium they even put on that is. My guess is that the deals,
L4 cache.
yeah, the deals for those parts have kind of already been laid out. My guess is Apple's bought a lot of them. My guess is, probably Dell has bought a lot of them, and we'll see specific parts based on that. And so in terms of throughput, like how many units actually sell with Iris versus not, I think will be interesting. And then finally, on the mobile side, we end at the 4.5 watt parts. These are the Core M series, so not Core i7 or i5 or i3. This is the Core M 6Y75, all dual core, 4-thread processors. The cool thing about this is if you look at the base clock at 1.2, the max turbo clock at 3.1, you're talking about a 1.9 gigahertz range from the base to the max turbo. And that is what, it's limited by the TDP, so it's not going to run at 3.1 for very long at all, maybe a second, maybe a couple of seconds, in order to, maintain that 4.5 watt total thermal dissipation, and to allow the thermal, the heat sinks and the thermal designs of these systems to actually dissipate the heat appropriately, right? So that's more for boosting up to make the touchscreen interface more reactive, or to launch an application quicker, or something like that. Something that's like a user response or user experience improvement that is very quick, but doesn't need to be like sustained, right? So if you try to run a rendering application, it's not going to run at 3.1 gigahertz on a system built on a Core M processor. It'll spike up to there, and then it'll slowly, or quickly rather, kind of go back down, maybe eventually hit that 1.2 gigahertz, and that's where your render speeds are going to go at. So that's kind of like your mobile lineup. There's a lot of stuff there. Any thoughts or questions or ideas before we move on to the desktop side?
Well, do we have an idea? Are any of these going to be available for holiday shopping season? If I'm thinking about a new, $500 to $1,500 or $2,000 laptop, are any of these parts going to be available before the
holiday?
End of the year?
I think so for sure. Yeah, I'm thinking early October we'll start to see some of the the Dell, the Lenovo's of the world have product available. I think Apple has an event coming up relatively soon. It wouldn't surprise me if they're the first ones out the door with these new Skylake processors. That tends to be how the things have worked, how that deal has worked in the past. I think by holiday time, by Thanksgiving, you'll have plenty of Skylake processors in all kinds of machines, whether it be gaming machines, ultrabooks, or 2-in-1 convertible type tablet style devices. Yeah.
Cool. Desktops, which kind of started backwards in a lot of ways.
Did. Yeah. It was so odd that they would launch the 6700K and the 6600K, the highest end Skylake parts, 91 watts.
Right.
Still have struggled with availability that you and I continue to talk about to this day.
Because I'm cranky about it. I understand.
I 100% understand, right? We have one here, and it was a sample given for a review, and now we wrote this glowing review of this product that nobody could buy. Obviously, it upsets a lot of people in such a way. The desktop side's a little bit easier. They have 35 watt and 65 watt parts in addition to the 91 watt flagship parts. 35 watts, all of these are LGA parts. All of these can be installed in motherboards. Obviously you don't want a Z170 board for your 35 watt part probably, but you'll go down the H series or the G series chipsets for those. Those motherboards are starting to filter out as well. But so you can get a Core i7 6700T. It's a quad core 8-thread processor, $303 price tag, 35 watt TDP. You can build a really nice, cool and quiet either home theater PC or file server that does transcoding on the fly type of thing. That's a lot of compute power and not a lot of thermal envelope, for sure. That's the only Core i7 part in that TDP range. You got a handful of Core i5s that are quad core, no hyper-threading. You got Core i3s that are dual core with hyper-threading. And they even brought back the Pentiums again with our 2-core, 2 threads, right? So interesting discussions to be had there, especially if you look at the 65 and 47 watt parts where the Pentiums, like there's a Pentium G4400 that's a dual core 3.4 gigahertz part that's going to be sell for $64. Now, is it gonna win in transcoding benchmarks against these other CPUs? No. Will it be perfectly capable of handling almost everything else you want to do on a daily basis? Probably. And it's a very aggressive starting price point. 64, 75, and 86 are the three kind of highest performing Pentium processors that are being released this quarter, I guess.
It's essentially an update to the part that's on the laptop I'm using for this podcast right now, or for this video, this Skype conversation right now, which I will say is a fan. The 2-core Pentium part, 2-core 2-thread Pentium part is fantastic. Although if you want to do something aggressive alongside of Skype or two things simultaneously, you will want more performance than you have. But it is a fantastic entry-level part. And $64 is a pretty amazing price for that.
Yeah, if you remember all the excitement about the Pentium G3258, I think that was the part number.
It's right over there.
It was like a budget part that a lot of people were doing. Like, I'm going to do a low cost build, but this keeps me inside the Intel ecosystem instead of the AMD ecosystem. There were downsides, right? Where like Far Cry 4 came out, and if you didn't have a system capable of 4 threads, it kind of freaked out and would let you start the game. You have to do some INI file hacking and trickery to get it up and running. So there may be some headaches kind of involved in a dual core 2-thread system that way still today. But I think for a lot of people that are on a tight budget that want a system that can handle single tasking incredibly well, that's going to be what I think you should be looking at, right? If you're on a cost.
I will say,
conscious
single tasking is the new multitasking, or if you're looking for a small server box or something to experiment with, because the other thing is the TDP on that's pretty, it's not 4.5 watts tiny, but you're still looking at a 47 watt part, which is pretty managed, a very thoughtfully applied 47 watts. The launch dates for these is kind of littered throughout
Oh, yeah.
2015 and 2016. Broadwell is in this awkward position of having been launched and now having been subsumed. I don't know how else to say it. I mean, it's somebody. I apologize for not knowing which website. They pointed out that the Skylake launch had pretty much completely screwed up the channel in terms of all the Broadwell parts that are out there.
Oh, really?
Well, it was their opinion that it was kind of ridiculous to launch this, and that's because Broadwell, of course, launched so late. It seems like Silver Lake is being launched early, even though Silver Lake feels it was an interesting idea that now you have, not only do you have sort of people anticipating 4 dozen Skylake parts, you also have all the existing Broadwell and Haswell parts that are cluttering up the market at this point. It'll be interesting to see like all the stuff that shows up on like Woot sell-offs and dark corners of Amazon, for the next few months. Speaking of which, let's take a moment to talk about asynchronous shaders.
Sure.
It's the most awkward transition ever. Scott Michaud wrote this up for PC Per. I would attempt to have an intelligent discussion about DirectX 12s and asynchronous shaders, but I would completely screw it up. So I'm just going to politely let you explain this one.
It's a tough. I mean, it's a tough idea to kind of grasp. The easiest way to think about it, at least that I've been told, is to imagine like if you're a GPU, say you're a GPU, Patrick, right, and the processor's sending you work, and it's giving it to you. Every once in a while, there's going to be bubbles where you could be doing work, but you're actually sitting there idle instead, and you're just waiting for the next piece of GPU workload to come down to you, right? So as things progress through, you get these little bubbles of empty space. What asynchronous shaders allow a GPU architecture to do is, if you're running multiple concurrent shaders or multiple concurrent applications, it can insert instructions for one of the other applications or more into those bubbles, into those empty spaces. So the GPU is being taken advantage of in a more complete fashion, more efficiently, and it's not kind of sitting there wasting time or wasting compute availability, if you will. So the idea behind an asynchronous shader is that you kind of, the game designer can say, okay, I want to run all these things. I don't necessarily care exactly what order, but here's a preference I would like it to do, but get them all done as quick as possible. And they can kind of switch back and forth between those things. Now, the problem with that is you run into an issue of something called context switching, which is where a processor, GPU or CPU, if it changes threads, has to kind of access different register sets. It has to access different data in order to do the compute on whatever data and math it's trying to do. So context switching is a topic, is a terminology that kind of points to how efficiently can a GPU or a processor switch context between one application or another, and at what performance penalty, right? For DX12, asynchronous shaders are not a required part of the API. Like, you don't have to support asynchronous shaders to be DX12 certified, but it is one of those optional ones that can be taken advantage of. The reason all this came up recently is that the latest DX12 benchmark, Ashes of the Singularity, came out, and we had issues where NVIDIA didn't scale very well in DX12 and AMD scaled amazingly in DX12. And part of that, as it turns out, is the developers using asynchronous shaders, and asynchronous shaders run better on AMD hardware, according to the developer, than they do on NVIDIA hardware. He even claimed that, enabling asynchronous shaders on NVIDIA GPUs caused huge performance issues and conformance issues, which would be like, did it pass certification and stuff like that? Were the correct results coming back that they expected to see? Those types of things. So it kind of launched one of those classic red team versus green team debates about, are asynchronous shaders important? Are games going to really utilize them in the way that this benchmark uses them, or this particular game engine uses them? Right. Does NVIDIA have support for them, but this developer not really implement it correctly or in the way that you have to for NVIDIA's hardware? That's one of the options. And it's a debate that we still don't have a resolution to. And honestly, I think a lot of the problem with this comes back to Microsoft, because they have been very closed and not wanting to discuss some of these DirectX 12 tier levels and feature levels and what they actually mean, and what vendors support which ones officially. it's all been very vague from both AMD and NVIDIA at the request of Microsoft. So this is another one of the instances that we're seeing where it's okay, there's this feature that we kind of know about. We know it exists, but they're being cagey about who supports it and to what degree. And it's kind of causing this confusion. There's if you look around online, there's some guys who wrote a benchmark that's supposed to specifically test asynchronous compute performance. And it shows AMD's, to Fiji architecture doing very well, and GCN doing very well, and Maxwell doing a little bit better, but Kepler doing really bad at it. So there's all kinds of debates going on. We don't have a resolution to it other than I had been emailed probably a dozen times by several people about asynchronous shaders, and we wanted to put something out there that said, here's what we know, and yes, we're aware of it, and we're kind of keeping an eye on it. So that's kind of all that is at, right? Is that it's a really cool feature. It's a great idea. And it's possible that one of the GPUs, AMD's, might be better at doing that than NVIDIA's, but we're not sure. Might be.
Might be. Could
Might
potentially be.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. Something that is not a might be, something that is a sack of awesome, according to my co-host, Mr. Ryan Shrouts, is the Ring Video Doorbell. This episode of Twitch is brought to you by the Ring Video Doorbell. Use your smartphone to see who's at the door. Mr. Shrout, I understand, despite the fact that you're in your office right now, you can use the Ring Video Doorbell to employ the Ring.com app and see just who or what is outside of your front door.
I can absolutely do that. And not so if nobody's here, I answer it and I can say, hey, yeah, leave the package, or I'll be there in a little bit. Go ahead and drop it off. If somebody is here, then I just get this fun instance of watching Ken answer the door to interact with the UPS guy for a little bit, which is a little bit awkward because you feel like a spy. But okay, good. Everything's been taken care of. You can hang up the call. You don't have to answer it or whatever, and you move on. And that kind of flexibility and just like usability for me as somebody who works for themselves and doesn't, I'm not in the office from 9 to 5 every day, is definitely a worthwhile feature to have.
So how long did it take you to install it?
Installation was quick and painless. The longest part was for me to find the correct drywall anchor for the screws I was using, because you don't have to have an existing doorbell. If you do, you can wire it up to that if it's the correct voltage, I think. And then you don't have to worry about the battery in it. If you don't have an existing doorbell there, as I did not on our office door, then it just uses an internal battery that has I don't know, we've had that for months now, 6 weeks, I think it's been installed, maybe 6-7 weeks, and I haven't had one notification about battery life at all yet. So I don't even know how long it lasts, but apparently quite a bit. Obviously, it's going to depend on how often you use it, how often somebody's ringing your doorbell, and how long you're talking to somebody out there. But it goes down into a pretty good hibernation state until somebody hits that button where it does the motion detection thing as well. So pretty easy to install. Anybody could do that, and it comes with pretty much all the tools you need to get it done.
That's smart. So it comes with an HD camera, night vision LEDs. People don't have to ring your doorbell. It has a motion detector built into it. So if somebody walks up to your door and starts looking around, you're going to get a video shot of them. First thing burglars do maybe is come up to the front door, knock, or ring the doorbell to see if somebody answers. Then they know not to break in. Most break-ins actually occur during the day. Like 95% of home break-ins occur during the day. You can install Ring in just a couple minutes. Like Ryan said, it's either on your doorbell wiring or off the built-in rechargeable battery. Put your mind at ease, protect your home with the Video Doorbell. Time Magazine named one of the top 10 gadgets of 2014. Ryan, would you too call it a top 10 gadget, although we could call it of 2015 instead of 2014?
Yes. It'll be there.
In a glowing endorsement. The man's using it to protect his home, his child, his very own dogs, his newborn baby, his wife. And right now you can get $10 off the normal price. Protect your home and have peace of mind with Ring, or just see who's outside if you're too lazy to get off your chair and go look. Ring.com/Twitch. That's ring.com, TWICH, and get $10 off the Ring Video Doorbell, but only if you go to ring.com/Twitch. And we want to thank them for their support of This Week in Computer Hardware.
Indeed.
I had a lovely conversation with David Murphy, who writes for the Wirecutter, yesterday. But before we mention that, I want to point out the giant. At first, I thought it was sort of a dead spider. And what I'm talking about here is the Asus RT AC5300U router. As Sebastian referred to it on PC Per, as the 8-antenna beast. And now I realize it's kind of like, you know, if the mountain on Game of Thrones becomes a king, this is what his crown is going to look like. There's just nothing subtle about this design. Can we pull the picture up there, the RT AC5300U? And I wanted to start with this before my conversation with Mr. Murphy, because we're talking about Google's On Hub, which launched this week, because this thing is a monster. Yeah, look at that. Look at this. Doesn't that look like some sort of psychotic crown design from Game of Thrones? AC 5300 speeds, tri-band wireless up to 1,000 megabits per second on 2.4 gigahertz and up to 2167 megabits on each 5 gigahertz band, 5,333 megabits per second combined on the 5 gigahertz band. Nitro QAM, like Nitro QAM technology or QAM technology for low latency gaming, 4K UHD streaming, 8 external antennas in a 4x4 config. It goes on and on and on. It's probably going to be a $300 part. Nothing exists that can combine 3 channels of 2167 megabits per second. That 5333 megabits per second is this is cool. There's nothing you own that can talk to this, and it's getting interesting because right now multi-user MIMO is starting to trickle out, which is the idea that your router, single-user MIMO is what it is now, or it basically gives its bandwidth to one client at a time. Multi-user MIMO is going to allow it to have multiple connections running simultaneously. Q4 2015, probably around $300. And what was interesting, this is a cool router and it's way more than you need. And, there's a possibility that by the time, this combined AC 5300, stuff is available, if it ever becomes available in your laptop or in a USB adapter, we might be on to WiGig at that point, which is still a year or two out. I bring that up because there's a really great article on the Wirecutter, and we got to interview David Murphy yesterday for the tech thing that launches this week about his testing of the Google On Hub, which he did as part of his continuing efforts to find the best possible router for the most people at the Wirecutter. If you've never been to the Wirecutter, they do a whole bunch of testing and a whole bunch of consulting with experts, and they read all the articles and reviews out there, and they try to isolate a single product or a group of products that will work best, so you don't have to spend a lot of time choosing something. So right now, their current choice for a router is TP-Link's Archer C7. It's a dual band 3-stream wireless AC router. They've tested it in real world testing, and it was delivering for $94 off Amazon, approximately twice the speed of the Google On Hub router. Google On Hub's router has very sophisticated, intelligently designed, 13 antenna array that's managed by computers in mayhem and joy. And unfortunately, internal antennas just never seem to perform as well as external antennas. The On Hub, which is, kind of came out of nowhere and is kind of fascinating. The setup, David said, was really, really easy. You can look at things and examine the data on your smartphone, but most of its features aren't enabled yet. The smart home control system is a Bluetooth 4.0. The performance literally was half as much as a router that costs half as much. Which is kind of a bummer. So I thought it was interesting about that. So we also talked a little bit about when is a $200 router actually worth it? What is going on with, multi-user MIMO, WiGig, and some of the future of these specs. And one of the things that does differentiate some of the high-end routers from some of the low-end routers, the $200 or $250, $200 routers from $100 routers, ease of setup and the interface. They tend to spend a little bit more time on that. But it's amazing to realize that in performance, many cases, going with a higher spec router, like an N900 over an N600 may not actually deliver better performance. In fact, he's seen N600 routers outperform N900 routers. So if you want to get somebody who did a bunch of good hands-on testing at the Google On Hub, wirecutter.com/reviews/best-y-fi-router is a really good read. Plus some looks at the inside of the astoundingly Amazon Echo-y looking column tube thing. It's a little disappointing. One of the things David said is it seemed very half-baked. Again, some of the basic features were not enabled. It is cool, right? The idea that the antennas on the Iron Hub are supposed to survey your wireless environment and move your Wi-Fi channel if things are crowded. Setup's really, really easy, but the performance was not particularly spectacular. Here we go. I'm going to quote David. Netgear's R6300 V2, which sells for $140, performed better at long range for 2.4 gigahertz than our previous best router pick, the 6250. However, the Archer 6 C7 was about 6 times faster on the same test and delivered a working 5 gigahertz signal at a range where the R6300 V2 could not. Yeah, the on-hub performance was just not impressive, which is a bummer because,
disappointing.
Most people care a lot about speed. And admittedly, you may not have you may not need all of the speed to access your internet connection, but there are other things people do over their router that involve performance. Yeah. The C7 was faster by a third and $100 cheaper. Ouch.
That's pretty significant.
Yeah, 42% and 47% slower than the similarly priced AirPort Extreme and Netgear R7. So basically half as fast as an AirPort Extreme or Netgear R7, 30% slower than a TP-Link Archer C7, which sells for half as much. Word to the wise.
Yeah.
Man, so that crazy crown router dead spider monster thing, the 8-antenna beast, the AC5300U, the RT-AC5300U, that came out at IFA, which is, of course, it's kind of the German CES. A bunch of phone announcements came out there. And the ROG G7252 gaming notebook with 4K and Skylake. So now we know at least we're one of... No, actually, there's no Core i7-6700 in this. It's pretty cool. It's a really radical new design. I kind of like it. I'm kind of curious how fat or how thick it is. Plasma copper, armor titanium, and lava red color. Intel Skylake platform, NVIDIA graphics up to a GTX 980M, 8 gigabytes, optional 4K display, which, boy, I bet is going to suck down battery life. Thunderbolt 3.0 technology, gaming keyboard with an anti-ghosting 30-key rollover with 2.5 millimeter long travel keys, which sounds like it would be really awesome to type on. 17-inch AG FHD IPS LED backlit display, which is essentially 1080p with G-Sync, or a 17.3-inch IPS LED backlit display, 3840 by 2160, again with G-Sync. Core i7-6700HQ or 6820HK processor, mobile Intel CM236 chipset. And by the way, I'm quoting Sebastian Peaks right up on this because I can't memorize this stuff. Again, the GTX 980M with 4 gigabytes or 8 gigabytes of GDDR5. 64 gigabytes of memory max. I want a Core i7 with 64 gigabytes of memory to edit with. DVD Super Multi Blu-ray combo, Blu-ray writer, built-in HD camera and array mic, and it is weighing 4.38 kilograms with an 8-cell battery. If the kilogram is 2.2 pounds, that means this is a very heavy laptop. So,
yeah.
Starting at $1,500, which is not outrageous for a badass 1080p gaming laptop, especially that one that is wrapped in copper, armor titanium, and lava red. Man, heavy though. I wonder if and it's kind of funny, I wonder if the power supply is included in that 4.38 kilogram number.
I don't know. I do not know.
It's, Let me double check that real quick. 4.38 kilograms is 9.65 pounds. Wow, that's heavy. That's
you get a lot of performance out of it, but it is big. You want it also would be really heavy? The next laptop listed there.
The ROG GX 700 gaming notebook that's water cooled. And that picture just freaks me out.
Yeah. So I'm pretty sure what we're looking at here is a very similar design of the primary gaming notebook that we looked at previously, right? The last thing we just talked about. But if you look at this picture, looking at the back of the notebook, and there's this big growth, there's this large mass attached to the back And this, I'm guessing, again, there's very little details on this because they're just calling it a preview. That is where your pump and radiator are. There's probably some docking capability there in terms of display connections or USB connections. All ASUS really says about this is that it's an all-new flagship gaming laptop, a 4K 17-inch screen, water-cooled system with pump radiator, mobile K-series CPU with overclocking, and an unnamed GeForce GTX graphics card. That's literally all the detail that they gave us on it. The mobile K-series part, that's cool. So that's like part of the Skylake roundup or lineup that is the first with an unlocked multiplier. So I assume ASUS will ship this with the ability to overclock or pre-overclocked out of the box when you are running it in this water-cooled mode. And I expect they do the same on the GPU as well. And again, no more details on this, but what I'm guessing is that there's like quick disconnects on the back of the laptop. And
I'm
you
laughing
kind of,
because
there's like there has to be a physical lever of some kind to kind of latch and lock it in place because you don't want any leaking to occur.
I'm envisioning my laptop sloshing when I walk around, or the inevitable drip over time. I mean, part of me thinks this is awesome, and part of me is like, oh, this just
could be insane
mess.
Yeah. I mean, it very well could be. I think I wrote in the post that what did I say at the end? It sounds crazy and kind of senseless, but I need to try it right away. Right. So the idea is
it says a lot about you, Ryan.
It does. It does. So, I mean, if the idea is as simple as when you disconnect it, you're taking an 8 or 9 pound laptop with you that uses normal fans and things clock down when you do that to kind of a normal, appropriate clock speed for a gaming notebook. You take it with you and then you bring it home, plug it in, and maybe you've got external displays connected, and you have a higher speed performance CPU and GPU running at a cooler temperature as well. I don't know. I would love to have sat in the meeting where this decision was made, this kind of production meeting. Right. And I hope that it comes out, and I hope that it's not $5,000, and I hope that it's pretty cool. But I have fears on all of that. So
as well you should.
I should, yeah.
As well you should. Speaking of things that are kind of curious, and I'm wondering what the price is going to be, the Chrono Labs C1 computer case hits Indiegogo. It's literally a DIY all-in-one. And props to Sebastian for coming up with that thought. Chrono Labs of Galway, Ireland is a startup that hopes to declutter your desk with their C1 computer case, a unique enclosure that allows you to mount a VESA-compliant monitor to the case itself, creating your own all-in-one system. I am sort of fascinated and slightly horrified by this. I can't decide if this is the neatest thing ever or a tremendously bad idea. So what we're looking at here is essentially a 3D render. It'll support micro ATX or ITX motherboards, an ATX power supply unit, a couple 3.5-inch drives, a couple 2.5-inch drives, low profile CPU coolers, 420 millimeter fans, or a 1x120 or a single 120 millimeter cooler and a 240 millimeter cooler for water cooling or liquid cooling. However, the water coolers won't fit if a micro ATX motherboard is used. If you scroll down to that second picture there, it gives you a better idea what's going on. It's essentially a case on a monitor stand with a VESA mount. And it's they're having a little bit of a slog on this one. There's some enthusiasm around it. If you look at the Indiegogo page, they're up to $1,282 in 3 days, which sounds minute considering how many billion-dollar Indiegogo and Kickstarter campaigns we've seen. But their goal is $2,000 because they just want to build one. They want to build a prototype, and the majority of their 10 of $1,000 of that $1,282 is people who have pledged $100 towards building the prototype, and in exchange have, for $100 you get to pre-order the final version of the case should it actually ship. So yeah, if you do the $50 discount, should it go into production, you'll get $50 off the finished C1 case if you do a $50 pledge, which will be available to back on Kickstarter in 2015, which I think is kind of funny given that they're on Indiegogo. And for $100, you pre-order the C1 case by choosing this reward. So, it's got a handle. It obviously reduces cable clutter, as they point out, because everything's stuffed together. 10.5-inch GPUs max. Somebody called a Nano. It's an interesting idea. They're going to produce 4 prototype cases for $2,000. So,
I'm a fan of the idea. We'll have to see how it actually gets implemented. Somebody else brought up concerns, I think, on Twitter about you might run into issues with noise, because now you have all those components not underneath your desk, but immediately behind your screen. So
you need to choose your components wisely.
Correct.
That entirely depends on what fans you put in, how fast you run them. Are you how hot is your GPU running? I also want to give a shout out to the Oliver, and I want to say Rory McNicholas, Oliver Burke and Rory McNicholas. The co-founder and engineer is Oliver. Rory is the co-founder and communications manager. And I would like to apologize to Mr. McNicholas if I've messed his name up. It's two young Irish gentlemen of 17 and 18 years of age. And they started with F1 in schools, which is, quote, the world's largest technology challenge for students. It challenges teams of 3 to 6 to design, build, and race a miniature Formula One car. They were one of 39 to reach the world finals in Abu Dhabi. And they intend, they say, to replicate this success with Chrono Labs. If you scroll down to the bottom of the Indiegogo page, you'll find these pictures. They have the skills and experience needed to create a truly useful and unique product. But like the F1 challenge, we rely on people's goodwill and interest in our product to get it off the ground. So I got to say, this is pretty cool to see a couple of young guys try to put something this sophisticated together, and I actually hope they do well.
Agree. Yeah, so, me too.
Yay, young people doing cool stuff. Oh my goodness. You know what else is cool?
What's that?
Braintree. Making payments work on your website without a lot of emotional trauma. This episode, and we should point out, this is a sponsored message. This episode of Twitch is brought to you by Braintree. I used to be able to speak, then I had children. Braintree is really cool. It's code for easy online payments. If you're building a mobile app and searching for simple payment solutions, you really need to shortlist Braintree. Check it out. The V.0 SDK for Braintree makes it easy to offer multiple mobile payment types: PayPal, Apple Pay, Bitcoin, Venmo, cards, quite a bit more, with a single integration that you can do in minutes. Simple, secure payments in minutes. It's 10 lines of code. The code, I am told by people who can read code, is elegant, clearly documented. They have SDKs in 7 languages: .NET, Node.js, Java, Perl, PHP, Python, and Ruby. It supports Android, iOS, and JavaScript clients. If you don't have time to deal with this, you can call Braintree, and they'll handle the integration for you, or they'll walk you through it. This is pretty cool. It's really, really cool, and it's really, really smart, and it's being used by a lot of people already. Braintree gives you an easy way to accept multiple payment types with one integration. Quick, knowledgeable developer support. If you have any questions, start accepting Apple Pay, PayPal, Bitcoin, Venmo, cards, and whatever comes next, which is cool. It's nice to have somebody else do the heavy work of figuring out a new payment system with literally a single integration, 10 lines of code. It's the Braintree V.0 SDK. One little tiny snippet of code, and you're set up in less than 10 minutes. To learn more and for your 50,000 in transactions fee free, go to braintreepayments.com/twitch. That is braintreepayments.com/twitch. We want to thank them for their support of the show. Airbnb, Uber, GitHub, StubHub, Slack. This is pretty cool. They are a PayPal company, so they've got somebody who understands money behind them, which is a good deal. Yeah, PayPal, Venmo, Apple Pay, Android Pay just added, Bitcoin, credit and debit cards. 10 lines of code. How cool is that? How easy is that? BraintreePayments.com/Twitch. We want to thank them for their support of this episode of This Week in Computer Hardware. My goodness. Because hard drives aren't big enough, because I can't afford the 16 terabyte SSD that was announced a couple weeks ago. Seagate has decided to tease me with an 8 terabyte enterprise hard disk drive. Alan wrote this up for PC Per. Enterprise capacity 3.5-inch hard disk drive, enterprise NAS hard disk drives, kinetic hard disk drives. The labeling on this is a little different. There's a cloud. There's an 8 terabyte. There's a big blue label. I kind of like it. It's very kind of chill. You know, it feels like I'm in some sort of really mellow nightclub with a thing going on. Kinetic is Seagate's push to connect arrays of drives via standard Ethernet, which, Alan Malventano writes, would allow specialized storage applications to speak directly to the raw storage via standard network gear. Kinetic hard disk drives are currently limited to 4 terabytes with 8 terabytes planned this coming January. This is pretty cool. I don't see pricing information, though. So I was kind of curious.
Not surprised,
about
I guess.
That. Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Fortunately. So, yeah, enterprise capacity, 3.5-inch hard disk drive, 8 terabytes. Pricing, TBA. So if you're looking for a giant, I'm just thinking like, oh, man, my Synology box could handle... Wow, that's a lot of storage. The math escapes me at the moment because I don't know the subtraction for 8 terabyte drives, but it would be epic. Western Digital, also from Alvin Malventano, updates MyCloud OS 3, refreshes the MyCloud Mirror. So the Western Digital's MyCloud Mirror is a very simple network-connected storage device that came with a suite of software and mobile apps to give remote access to the data stored at home. Gen 2, they say, is even faster. This is basically a refresh to the MyCloud Mirror. Quote, it's available for pre-order today and in stores at the end of this month. The new mirror is essentially a speed-boosted version of the original version, which was actually pretty fast to begin with. Something the added speed may help with is the functionality being added to Western Digital's MyCloud OS software. OS 3 adds some requested features, such as using the MyCloud as a hub for syncing across multiple systems, kind of like Dropbox, but a private version of it. The ability to back up or offload pictures and videos from mobile devices, and their MyCloud albums. So you can collect and share all your friends' photos in full resolution. So slated for September 21st release, pre-order now, and Alan's going to get one of those in for testing as soon as it is available. Man, how'd the Asus, as I eventually contemplate someday being able to own a Skylake processor, although I'm almost tempted to just break down and buy the 6600 as much as it pains me to contemplate that. What did Maury think of the Asus Z170A? Is this one of the high-end boards or one of the more affordable boards?
It's one of the more affordable boards. I know we're running late, so I'll talk on it real quick. I mean, it is. I think it's $165 is the MSRP for it. So on the affordable side of it, but you still get a fantastic set of features, right? Like you still get USB 3.1 support for 2 ports of that. You still get Intel Gigabit internet support. You get the same overclocking and power delivery capability that you get on like the $300 and $350 Asus Z170 series motherboards. So that a lot of that PCB design work is kind of universal across their entire product portfolio. You get 8-channel audio with DTS support. You get support for three-way Crossfire and 2-way SLI. You got M.2 SATA support and M.2 PCIe support. SATA Express. You've got 6 total SATA 6 gigabit per second ports. There's a lot on this board. And like I said, I don't really want to walk through all of it here piece by piece, but there is Maury's review goes into a lot of detail, does a lot of performance testing, all the testing now converted over to Windows 10 as well. And for $165, he came away very impressed with it. It did get an Editor's Choice Award. So for those of you that are settling for a 6600K or are buying every other component possible and then waiting for the 6700s to show up in stock, I think this would be a pretty good option for you, actually.
And what's the pricing on that again?
$165.
Man, I'm loving, not that I can buy the processor I want to go with it, but the fact that there's a Z170 board. Well, yeah, we're just going to keep being obnoxious about that until the chips actually are. Yeah, you're teasing me, Intel. You're teasing me. And I want to spend my money on a new Intel CPU, but you don't have any for sale. My obnoxiousness aside, which is probably starting to really irritate the user base, I was really excited about the Z170 lineup because so many of these boards are actually affordable. It's been so long since we've seen sort of a new top-of-the-line CPU launch from Intel where you didn't have to buy into a $300 motherboard or a $360 motherboard. So the fact that you can buy a decent $125, $165 motherboard and get up and running with pretty much all the stuff you care about on Z170 is pretty fantastic.
Agreed.
Just wish there was another, I don't know, 4 or 5 USB ports on this motherboard. More USB 3.0.
Look through the other parts of their family. You'll find ones that have 6 USB 3.1 ports that are obviously backwards compatible. But there's a lot of different options out there.
Yeah. Well, at this point, I've got an Anker USB hub and charger that I'm kind of in love with. I'll talk about that next week, which has 7 USB 3.0 ports and 3 Power IQ charging ports in one thin and externally powered device. And, it makes things more manageable. Because I don't have to, because I now have all 4 of the USB ports on this motherboard filled, but I still have another 6 I can work with and 2 devices connected to it already. So in any case, ladies and gentlemen, so much excitement this week. Tech Thing, again, we had David Murphy, who explains a lot of the really irritating stuff about why it works the way it does or doesn't work in the Wi-Fi and router world and why they pick the TP-Link 6C7 as their choice as the best router for most people. The Google On Hub review. Mr. Schrouts is furiously benchmarking, I think. Is there a new CPU coming anytime soon, or anything you can talk about that is not under NDA?
So Intel's not sending out any more processors. I'm hoping to see some of those lower cost Skylake parts show up on Newegg or Amazon and buy a couple to test here. Like I said before, our R9 Nano review is going to be up next week, so keep an eye out for that. We're doing a game stream. We're doing a live game stream. For anybody who's watching us record the show live, later this evening, we're doing another game stream at 8 p.m. Eastern. We're going to give away a pair of the Logitech G29 racing wheels that are like $400 a piece, which basically a game stream is a live stream of me playing racing games very poorly, getting frustrated, and then turning around and driving the wrong direction to try to crash into people that are racing correctly.
It's classy. So it's a good model for your child.
Yeah, it is. Thank you. Yeah. I only teach the best. Only teach the best.
So much love. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. With that, ladies and gentlemen, since I've just mocked my co-host's parenting skills, which have just started developing, I'm going to just stop speaking. Thank you all for listening. I remind you that every single episode of This Week in Computer Hardware is available at twit.tv/twitch. You can subscribe on iTunes or via the RSS feed. The information on that is again at twit.tv/twitch. He's at Ryan Shrout. I'm at Patrick Norton. You can also find me at techthing.com. On the show I do with Shannon Morris, a.k.a. Snubs. And we love each and every one of you, and thank you for listening each and every week. I'm Patrick Norton.
I'm Ryan Shrout.
We'll see you next week on Twitch.